You're listening to the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans.
If you want to have guarantees, you have to buy a washing machine.
Monte with a scooping header.
We don't lose a match, either we win or we learn. And today we learned.
It's infield to Mane, 25 yards out. Lovely ball for Bella. Onside, 1-0. Buffon shot. Oh my word.
Unbelievable. We ran around the pitch like Bambi on ice. It was very, very embarrassing to watch.
And now, your host, Matt Markstone. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans. My name is Matt Markstone. I'm the host of the show. No matter where you are, no matter how you may be listening, whether this is your first time or you've been here before, thank you for making the show a part of your day. I hope that you enjoy it. And a couple quick announcements before we get to this week's interview with Kurt Zottl. There's been an addition to the Southampton Delivery family ecosystem, whatever you want to call it. The new website is up and running at southamptondelivery.com. And that is only made possible by the contributions of those at patreon.com/SFC delivery, such as Justin Woodward. Justin recently signed up and is the newest member of the Patreon community. And because of his contribution, we were able to launch the website as well as the new weekly newsletter that will come out later this week. So if you are enjoying the show and you're interested in stuff like that, go ahead and head over to the website, sign up for the newsletter, and we'll be in contact with you later this week. And that kind of does it for the good news. Because what happened at the weekend wasn't great, whether it was on the pitch where we looked like we may have been playing under Claude Puel or even worse, and in the stands where we had fans doing some unsavory things, but at least the club reacted quickly. The fans around them reacted quickly. And everybody knows that that is not what this club stands for. That is not what the fans stand for. And nobody thinks that's appropriate. So whether it was just too many drinks, it doesn't matter what it was. It's not appropriate. But yes, that's that. And I'm glad that's over with. And hopefully, others, and even if there were others around him who may have thought that was appropriate, hopefully the message has been sent loud and clear that that's not what the fans stand for. The majority of us anyway. And every fan base has people like that. But I think that sums that up just fine. As I mentioned earlier, Kurt Zottl joins me this week. Kurt is on Twitter at Kurt Zottl, and he also hosts a podcast called The BSO Show. That's on Twitter and Instagram at The BSO Show. So if you're interested in staying up to date with a range of sports, not just any one particular sport, give the show a follow, see what you think, and hopefully you enjoy that as well. But Kurt and I talk about the match, obviously, against Cardiff City, the failure to pick up points. We look at everything from the team selection to the lack of squad depth to we have to talk about Jack Stevens carelessly giving the ball away, but we will talk about all of that over the course of the show. We'll answer your questions and more. And one thing that we didn't mention, and partially because I didn't really pick up on it until afterwards, was Ryan Bertrand is back. We did talk about that. I did notice that he was in the team, but Højbjerg remained captain, and that was something that I was interested in looking at a little bit. And I think we'll have to see how that plays out, whether Højbjerg is really the long-term captain or whether Bertrand gets it back or how it goes. So anyway, that was one thing that we didn't talk about that I kind of was at least thinking about afterwards and figured it was worth mentioning here. So anyway, let's get to the interview now. Hopefully you enjoy the show, and hopefully you'll check out the new website at southamptondelivery.com. All right, we'll talk to you on the other side. We'd like to welcome to the Southampton Delivery Podcast, Kurt Zottl. You can find him on Twitter at Kurt Zottl. It's in the show notes if you want to check it out. He's the host of the BSO Podcast, and he's a fan of Saints, and he's here to talk about a disappointing game. I would say good afternoon or good evening, but we'll just say evening. And how you doing, Kurt?
I'm doing good. Obviously, a little upset about the result today, but, happy to be on the show with you. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I appreciate you reaching out and coming on. And we talked a little bit before. I listened to your show, and it's not soccer specific or football specific, but you guys cover a lot of stuff. But just for anybody who hasn't heard it or whatever, what is the BSO podcast and what it's about, and where can people find it if they were interested in that?
So yeah, I do my own podcast, joined by a couple of my buddies from school. So it is called the BSO Podcast, which you can find on Anchor, find on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, and then there's a couple more small websites or apps, but those are the main ones if you're interested. So we do cover all sports. We cover football, basketball, soccer, baseball, etc. And then we just give our thoughts and reactions on it, and we just having a good time about it. We did start in September, so it's been going on for about 5 or 6 months now, and it's been great. So having a lot of fun with it, obviously. Yeah,
and you guys are putting out, I think, for a lot of the time, 2 episodes a week, and staying pretty timely with trade deadlines and stuff. And so it was interesting when you guys got into, I would say, college football and maybe college basketball, just stuff that I don't pay attention to. So I was like, I had to really pay attention to keep up with it, but it was good. I enjoyed you guys kind of breaking down everything from the World Series to the NBA trade, or not the World Series, the Super Bowl to the NBA trade deadline and all that stuff. So yeah, I appreciate you doing that. And I think everybody who listens to the show probably knows I really like podcasts. So it's one more to kind of check out. But let's talk a little bit about you. And I mean, the question that always comes up whenever we talk to a fan that's in the US about this team is how did you, I guess, come to support Saints over some of maybe the other teams that you're definitely kind of more exposed to, I guess?
It's actually kind of a funny story how I grew up and supported Southampton. So I was about, honestly, can't remember the age. Maybe it was like 11 or 12. Honestly, could have been a little bit older. But we were playing Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, and I had no team to support at the time. Like, I was just, a lot of people were choosing teams, obviously, in the top 6, like Man City, Chelsea, Manchester United, etc. So I didn't really want to be one of those. I kind of wanted to be different in a way. So Southampton was playing at Stamford Bridge, and I remember Sadio Mane, I wish he was still on the team, but scored in like the first 20 minutes. It's kind of, I can't remember it exactly, but then like from that moment, like I just, as a joke, I kind of was supporting him just because I was like, that's him. But then like as I started to actually learn about the team, I realized that it was actually a very fun team to support. Obviously, we were a much better team. We were in a top 6 situation, top 8. We were going for that Europa League spot, for an example. So it was very fun to support that team. And it wasn't a team that everyone was enticed to knowing or like knew a lot about. So when people ask me who my favorite soccer team was, I'd say Southampton. And they usually be like, oh, I mean, haven't heard that one before. So it's usually fun when I can interact with a lot of Southampton fans, because you don't really see a lot of them where I'm from. So, that's basically how I became a fan.
I mean, so you support the team, and you live, I think, in North Carolina, you said?
Yes, Charlotte, North Carolina.
And so is that a big, like, we'll call it football, but is that a big football, place? Or is there a lot of football around? Or is it more kind of geared towards the American sports? I know you guys have, college basketball is a big thing. I know that, but what was soccer like or football like for you growing up? So,
me growing up, like not a lot of people played soccer per se, or football. But the thing is, as I was like, growing up, I feel like more players and more people were becoming more intrigued with the sport. Because I was talking to my dad about this. He was telling me that like absolutely no one was playing soccer, because he grew up in not North Carolina, but he grew up in like the DC area by Maryland. So it's like 8 hours away. So I would say it's pretty close for the most part. But he would tell me that like he knew like no one that played soccer. So he was seeing our generation. He's seeing our generation play soccer, and he was telling me that the problem was that, like him, for an example, couldn't teach me how to play soccer per se, because he hadn't had the experience. But hopefully when I'm like an adult, I'll be able to teach my kids and et cetera how to play soccer. So I feel like with future generations, obviously soccer's become more popular. But in the Carolinas per se, I wouldn't say it's that popular actually. I feel like around the high school level and middle school, maybe college, a lot more people like soccer instead of like adults per se, because I feel like adults, you obviously have American football and American basketball, which I would say are the most popular here. So I feel like soccer will become bigger in the future, but it's not huge per se right now.
Yeah. And I mean, in living where you live, you don't have an MLS team super close. I mean, I can't, off the top of my head, I can't tell if it would be Atlanta or Nashville or DC United. They're all probably pretty far from you. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So like I said, my dad grew up in the DC area. So I like all DC sports when it comes to like Redskins, Wizards, Nationals, and then DC United. So I am a DC United fan. But if you were from North Carolina, I mean, I don't even know who you would choose. I mean, I guess Atlanta, that'd be the closest. But Atlanta just became a team. I think, was it 2017?
Yeah.
So I mean, what are you going to do before then? Who are you going to support? Maybe even Orlando. I mean, that's the case. So I like how they're adding new teams in America. Obviously, you've seen a lot of teams be developed in MLS. So hoping that maybe Charlotte or North Carolina can get one. Or we do have a Charlotte Independence team, but it's in the second division of American soccer tier. So if they added in relegation and promotion, maybe they would become my new favorite team.
Yeah. I know there's a lower division team in Fresno now that's about 2.5 hours away from me, maybe 3 hours. But it turns out it's actually a little closer than LA just because you don't have to deal with all the traffic. So it's actually a guy who lives in Bakersfield, Dave Lee, is a fan, and one of the patrons of the show. So I was texting him last night. We think we're going to try to get to one of those games together this season if we can. So that'll be a good time. And they're a brand new team, so it'll be I think I can support them and not feel bad. Not cheating on Houston yet until they get promoted. And we'll have decisions to make, but not really. I'm a Houston fan. So, and I didn't have any family in Houston. I just made poor life choices there. Anyway, so let's, I mean, do you play football? Do you play soccer or what?
Yeah. So I do play for my high school team. I also play for a club. I actually do have a game tomorrow. So,
nice.
But yeah, I mean, I've been playing soccer, I think, since I was like 6, so it's always just been a part of my life.
And what position do you play most often?
Like early soccer, I was playing a lot of center mid, but the thing is, like, a lot of people play center mid and midfield, so now I usually play outside back.
Okay, that's me too.
Nice.
It's definitely my favorite, and it's definitely the position that I tend to watch Ryan Bertrand more or Valerie more or whatever, just because I enjoy that. But I will say that I think we've avoided talking about the match about as long as we can.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I guess we got to do it. But before I do that, I want to ask you one more thing. I'm gonna stall on this as long as I can because I'm not looking forward to discussing it. But what kind of made you decide to start your podcast? I mean, there are a lot of podcasts to listen to, but the decision to start and then stick with it, which you guys have done, and I know we're going back to something we already talked about, but what made you decide to go with it? And then I guess, has it changed the way you watch sports at all?
Yeah. So, I started making a couple accounts before, like, I made the podcast. I also have an Instagram account that goes along with the podcast, but I made a couple Instagram accounts just because I wanted to give my thoughts, because there wasn't really a place where I could give my thoughts. I could tell people, but I feel like if I just wrote it on paper and let everyone knew, then like I would be telling everyone what I believe in. Mm-hmm. So I never really got huge until obviously September when I was watching I can't remember, I think it was a college football game. And I had like a really bold prediction. I can't remember what it was per se. And I was like, I want everyone to know. I don't want to keep it to myself. Like, I want people to know exactly what I'm thinking when it comes to sports. So I was like, I'm going to make an Instagram account. So then I made it. It's obviously called the BSO Show if you guys do want to check it out. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to do too much self-promotion, but...
That's fine. It's totally fine, man.
So then I was like, I can't do this alone, though, because I've tried it a couple times and just hasn't succeeded. Because when you're starting an account, a couple times, you just don't have the motivation to really post. Or even when it comes to podcasting, some days you're just not really in the mood to talk about a game that happened. Like, for an example, like, we're both probably not going to want to talk about that Cardiff game today. But, like, the thing is, I was like, I'm going to have to get some help, because if I have others helping me out, they could maybe give me some motivation. If there's some days I don't want to post, they can post for me. So then we had started the account, and then we were like, let's just get a podcast going, because I've always been a fan of podcasting. I've seen others podcasts before. So I was like, I'll give it a try. And even if we don't get a lot of listeners, it's just something fun to let out my feelings and how I feel about some certain aspects of sports. So basically, just that's how it started. I just wanted what people know what I was exactly thinking, because I didn't want to just tell one person. I wanted to tell a bunch of people, because maybe even those people who listen to my stance could agree with me and tell other people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and it is a big commitment, and it is a time, it's kind of not time sensitive, but it can take up a lot of time if you let it, I tell people all the time, this is my one hobby. This is other than playing, and that's it. That's all I do.
Right. Yeah.
And it works out perfectly with the time difference. We were talking about that earlier with, usually I can record and stuff during, when my family's not around, or usually when they're asleep. Not the case today. So if you hear, my daughter's having a sleepover, so if you hear little girls in the background, that's what that is. But it works out for me, and it's a good way, because there aren't a lot of fans around to talk about that stuff. But I guess on that note, we got to kind of go into the match. And so, leading up to the match, people are already asking, the team's going to go away next week for some warm weather training. Hasenhüttl had spoken in the press conference in part 2 that was released a little bit later on Thursday about his, my Yoshida probably not coming straight back in. And I know that's going to be something we're going to have to discuss today, because it was yet more kind of poor defending from our center backs that led to the goal. And Stevens was already under some pressure from the handball last week. So when that comes out, when the lineup comes out and it's McCarthy, I wasn't necessarily surprised. I didn't think Bertrand would start. I thought the back five was going to remain absolutely the same. And then we had this 3-man midfield, which I think Ward-Prowse, Romeu, and Højbjerg have played well. It's hard to drop any of them, and then we're limited up top. But looking at the lineup and kind of all things considered, were you okay with the team that Hasenhüttl selected today, and the formation and everything else?
Honestly, I was actually happy about it. So obviously, like you said, I thought it was going to be Target instead of Bertrand on the left. But obviously, seeing Bertrand back, I love seeing him play outside back, because that's what I play. So I was like, having Bertrand back is obviously, I love it. So I was perfectly fine with the back five. And then Ward-Prowse, Romeu, Højbjerg, you touched on it already. It's hard to drop 3 of them. Obviously, you can't drop Ward-Prowse because he's playing unreal under Hasenhüttl. So you can't really drop him. And then, like you said, up front, we're only so limited. So I wasn't surprised to see Long and Redmond up top.
When I saw that we were playing essentially a 5-3-2 or a 3-5-2, I was a little bit disappointed. Because Cardiff are going to sit back. That it's going to be something that we're going to have to kind of break down. Somewhere we're going to have to break down. We're going to need people moving in and out of the lines, and you wonder why Armstrong's out there. And then when you notice he's not even on the bench, it has to be an injury, and it came out pretty soon after.
Correct.
That he picked up a knock in training. So that hurt today, I think, because I think you really could have used him. And I wonder if he was fit. I doubt it, but if he's fit, maybe you have just Redmond and him up top,
right?
Instead of Long, because it's nothing against the guy, but he doesn't score, and he was pretty bad today. Today he did not have.
No, trust me. Like, if we get more to Long, I'll tell you how much I'm not a fan of him. But the thing is, the 5-3-2 you're talking about, or 3-5-2, whatever you want to call it, I'm not a fan of it either. But I wasn't surprised that it happened. I understand you said Cardiff is just going to be defensive the whole game, which, I don't blame them for that. But the thing is, we've been playing this formation for so long now. Obviously, we're unbeaten in the new year. So I wasn't surprised that they changed it up, because we're not going to change up something that's working. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Obviously, when we were under Hughes, that wasn't because we lost. We always lost. And then us seeing not losing, it almost helped brought a new belief to Southampton fans, and I thought that Hasenhüttl just didn't want to risk anything per se. So that was basically why I thought he did it.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at the team that we had available, the people that we have available, it's probably the best we can do, and I think that means we have issues. We don't have anybody in the team that is going to break teams down. We don't have that creative kind of player that can unlock teams. We are relying so much on Redmond right now, and
It's crazy.
In James Ward-Prowse kind of, being kind of revitalized, and that's asking a lot. You can't expect performances like the last couple of weeks from either of those two all the time. They haven't shown that to be their normal, and maybe they will get there, and maybe they are there, but I don't think we can expect that. But so I would prefer us to play a 3-4-3, but with Armstrong out and everything else, I think that's and how well the midfield has played, I think it was probably the right thing, even though in the moment I wasn't necessarily that happy. And I don't know if you were watching today and you had the same commentary I did, but they kept mentioning how defensive Valerie was, and my guest last week said it, but I was thinking about it, like, I don't really see him as being that defensive. I thought last time we played against Cardiff, we played in a back four and he was exposed kind of all game, and then I think he does better as a wing back when he has the extra cover, and he's at a lot of times very far forward and very high up the pitch, and I think that's where he's better. But I was interested to get your thoughts on him specifically and in the system.
Yeah, obviously Valerie, just a very young player, so he's gonna make mistakes. I mean, from every young player, you're gonna see that. So if he does become too defensive, whatever you want to call it, I mean, I understand the mistakes. Now that you say, like, I understand why the commentaries want to say he was too defensive, but I definitely agree with you. I love seeing Valerie have the freedom to go up the sideline, because I feel like he's such a young player and he wants that explosiveness, if that makes sense. So I feel like that's where he's key. Like with Bertrand, I don't think Bertrand has that much explosiveness like Valerie does per se. Yeah,
I thought today that we had a couple of times where Valerie, I mean, we'll get to it because it was late on in the match, but he's I think he does a really good job in that wingback system. I'm not ever as impressed with him in a back four, but that's me. And I think we talk about us winning games and stuff like that. And Hasenhüttl went back early on when he was in the team. It might have been during the transfer window where he said, with five at the back, we are better defensively, but we don't have enough going forward. And then if you flip that and you play a back four, we're not solid. Almost every single time that we've gone to a back four in a match, I think we've scored, but we've also conceded.
Right. Yeah.
And so it just turns into us kind of being a player short. And I think that's what everybody said in the transfer window was we missed an opportunity to bring in an attacker and an injury to Ings. And now we're looking at, it's either Austin or Long for 65, at least 70 minutes. And then the other, and maybe Sam Gallagher, and you don't know if he's going to get a chance to play a full match. But, I mean, man, the first half, there was not a whole lot going on.
No, not at all.
We played the ball around nicely. We passed it nicely. But, I mean, were there any moments there that kind of stood out to you as being kind of noteworthy?
I mean, not any particular. I know early we did have that really good chance when Valerie was on the run, and then Bertrand put in that cross, and then it was corner or whatever. But I feel like that was basically it per se. I mean, obviously it was a 0-0 first half. There wasn't really any moments that caught my eye. I'm not going to lie. I was watching the match, but I wasn't like full on paying attention that first half. A couple of times I would check my phone or whatever, just because it wasn't eye catching that first half. So, were there any big moments for you that you would mention?
I think the only real chance that we created was about 17 minutes in. Somebody played the ball. I think it was Hoiberg played the ball long to Redmond, who ran onto it, and the goalkeeper Etheridge started to come, and then he kind of retreated, and Redmond was able to cut it inside, and then he just pulled a shot. He pulled it well wide. But I don't know. I thought that one of the things that I noticed was Stevens playing in that center back role, in that central center back role in the three. He had some freedom to go forward today, and somebody in one of the text message threads or whatever said, is Stevens playing defensive midfield? And it almost looked like he was when we were in possession. And because we had the ball so much, he was in that role a lot. And I thought it was good. I thought he took space very well. But it just came down to nothing. It seemed like every time we got the ball close, either crosses were off, or we just took too long, or we just lost the ball. And I don't know, it wasn't great, and I think there was one moment where Harry Arter stepped on Redmond's foot and Redmond gave the ball away, but it should have been a foul on Arter, but it didn't get picked up. But it's, I don't know. To be honest, no, there wasn't a whole lot other than I thought Steven's role today was a little bit different. And I thought that maybe it had to do with the fact that we were playing against Cardiff where we were going to have to push forward, and that allowed James Ward-Prowse and Højbjerg to kind of push forward a little bit more, and then allowed Romeo even a few extra yards to kind of hold the ball in, but it just didn't materialize. It didn't come to anything, and I don't know. I think that sums up the first half for me anyway.
Yeah. So I don't know if we're gonna talk about this later on the podcast, but do you think that Stevens should be starting next match, or would you maybe have to put Yoshida there now that he's back?
I think we'll come to it. Anything from the first half that I can remember, I don't think the corners are particularly great. I don't know if we had a shot on target, maybe one. I can't remember at that point. I just know that I was kind of counting them as we were going through, and it wasn't very many. So 3 shots for us, or 3 shots total in the entire first half for both teams. 2 for us, 1 for them, 1 on target for us, 0 for them. So that's not great. It wasn't great football to watch. There's a reason it was on NBC Sports Gold probably, and not the they didn't want to broadcast this as the world's best football match, but it I don't know, maybe I think it was just nerves, maybe the fact that they were at home, maybe the fact that, it is such a big game, but you would just kind of expect that it's just such a big game. Go out and play, go out and express yourself, make sure you put the other team on the back foot. And even though we had the ball, I wouldn't say that Cardiff were overly nervous at times. I think they were pretty comfortable.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But going into halftime, I think it's hard to bring very many positives into it. It's hard to imagine or think that we really played well, even though we had the ball. And I think it's become a pretty clear method of play that we play better without the ball. When teams want to come at us and we can counterattack and kind of put them on their heels that way, I think we are much better with it than when we get more and more possession. We tend not to do anything with it. And it's kind of goes all the way back to what it was like under Claude Puel, where you can have the ball for 60% of the time or 55% of the time or whatever it is, but it's what you do with it when you have it. Whereas sometimes with Hasenhüttl, we've had the ball as little as 30, 35%, and we've won, or we've gotten a draw, or we've, at least created opportunities, and we just didn't have it today. We looked slow. We looked sluggish. We looked a little bit sloppy. Yeah,
and something I wanted to add to that, I feel like this is honestly weird, but I feel like when we do have that 60 to 65% of possession, we work really well getting the ball out, going to the midfield. But when we're in that final third, I'm just not convinced. But I feel like when we're on the counterattack, it opens up a lot more space for the strikers to just run on through, because obviously everyone's pushed up. So I feel like when we counterattack, obviously Ralph Hasenhüttl, and even at RB Leipzig, has always been a fan of the counterattack. So you made a great point. I feel like Southampton are a much better team when counterattacking out instead of just building up the play, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's I don't know how you fix that. I don't know if it's players, if it's you just have to have a little bit more time on the training ground. I don't really think it's that. I think that maybe just the style of player that we have, and kind of the way we've been playing football for so long now under the past couple of managers, that it's just not conducive to really breaking teams down and doing that. So it's going to be difficult for us to kind of get out of it, because teams are going to realize that if you just give us the ball and defend and stay organized, that you're probably going to have a pretty good shot of at least taking a point away from us,
Right.
Going into the second half, I think the best chance we had early on was Valerie. Going forward, we kind of talked about this earlier, but in the 53rd or 54th minute, he kind of goes forward, he kind of takes on a defender, and he just happens to get his shot right down the throat of Etheridge, so nothing comes from it. But I would say I was really impressed with him, and I think he did it again a little bit later on once we were down as well.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of Cedric, but I feel like Valerie, obviously being at that young age, he's only going to get better. And I feel like you have to add in, you can't just be the same, you can't just have the same players when he did, obviously with Pellegrino and Hughes. And bringing in Valerie, obviously he's a new player, and I think you talked about this on the last podcast. You're saying it was almost like these young players in the academy almost felt like a transfer window, obviously, because us fans were not exposed to them. So I feel like seeing Valerie play every match is obviously great for him, and it's great for us fans seeing that we have a little bit of promise in him. But yeah, I mean, I loved what Valerie's done for us so far, and I know I just said this, but the way he can go forward with the ball is just incredible to me, and I love it.
Yeah, and we'll get to his other kind of chance that he created right after we talk about their goal, because with about 22-ish minutes left to go, they have a corner. I think it was their first one, and they put it into the box. It's a striker or somebody getting to the ball over, I believe it's Vestergaard and Højbjerg. He does it, and then Romeu loses Bamba at the back post, who just redirects it past McCarthy. So it's textbook stuff. It doesn't matter if you play if you're man marking or you're playing zonal marking or whatever it is. You have to attack the ball. You have to be responsible for your man, and those are the type of things that when we control the game to the level that we did today, that you just give them a lifeline. You give them essentially the opportunity to go do what they've been doing all day, which is defend and really, say, come break us down, and we can't.
I feel like with that goal, it was just honestly a very unfortunate event. I wouldn't blame anyone or even our team particular. It was just one of those things where I feel like you're just going to have a goal like that. If it's maybe every game or every 2 games, it was a very unfortunate event. So I feel like there wasn't a place to really blame there. I mean, obviously, maybe you could get a clearance out of that. You need to defend better on corners, but I feel like that's not the goal, obviously, I'm going to get most upset with. Obviously, we all know it's the last one. I'll talk about that later, but I feel like that wasn't one that maybe a lot of fans can be upset with, but I feel like we can't really blame someone in particular for that goal. It was just an unlucky occurrence.
Yeah. Then kind of next moment that jumps out is Valerie again running. And I don't know, you could make the argument that perhaps Valerie was our best offensive player today. Just simply in terms of chances created. I mean, he runs not down the right sideline. He kind of cuts inside and winds up getting a shot away that's deflected. And then both Austin and Elyounoussi have a chance to do it, in Cardiff are just throwing their body in the way, and they managed to deflect it out. It comes to a corner, which we had 8 of, and we were kind of unable to do a whole lot. But we're just going to jump all the way into stoppage time. And at this point, I think we haven't created a whole lot of chances from open play in the last 20 minutes after going down. Some substitutions have been made. If you look at who came in, I don't really think there's anything you can say about it. I think Vestergaard tends to be the center back that gets brought off. If we go to a back 4, and I don't know. So you go into stoppage time, and I think that maybe the crowd is maybe picked up a little bit because it's 5 minutes. We have 5 more minutes, 5 minutes to try to change the game and get back into it. And I don't know, that Ward-Prowse delivery was probably the best one he had from a corner all day, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And I'm not even sure anybody gets a touch on it on the way through. And
it does. It's a head on. I can't remember who. And then the head goes to the back post with Stevens finishing it off. Okay, so maybe I think it's Austin at the front. Yeah.
I just wasn't sure if he actually got a piece of it or not. But anyway, Stevens just completely unmarked there and puts it away. And then I hadn't even finished writing the tweet that says, here we go. I haven't even finished putting in the notes for the show. And then Cardiff are going right back down the other way. And you talk about just a wild swing of emotion, because being, pretty down when we go into stoppage time down a goal to just complete kind of jubilation and almost a sense of relief, even though it's only a draw at that point. It's not really enough for us to go in, to what happens next. And I guess I'll just let you talk about it there for a second.
Obviously, our team and a lot of fans wanted to win from this, wanted to get 3 points. Obviously, it was a very important game against a relegation rival, Cardiff. But with the occurrence of the game, I was going to be so happy with a draw. You're honestly supporting Hasenhuttl hasn't been beat in 2019, and you're just hoping that it can happen. And then I mean, they're, like you said, they're just immediately on the other end. And then a strange occurrence happens when I think, was it Stevens lost the ball, and then they put in like a cross. And then from that 18, and then, you know, it's a goal from that. But, I mean, it was just a very tough loss. Now that we're in relegation zone, I mean, what can we really do? I mean, I know Newcastle's in 17th, but they still have a game to play on, was it tomorrow or Monday? I think it's Monday. So, I mean, obviously it hurts. I know Hasenhüttl said after the game, it's going to be a lot tougher, which it is. So we're just going to have to see what happens now. I mean, anything you want to say particularly about like the points? I mean, obviously we lost major points there, could have gone 3, even 1, which would help. So anything else you want to add on with the occurrence of the game?
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about the goal, and I think this is more like some of the goals we've conceded late on in recent times, I guess. And it's, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, the header, Bednarak's header doesn't get it clear enough, but you can't blame it there. And then the deflection off of Stevens, and then like that shot, like I just wanted that shot to go wide, come off the post, let McCarthy pick it up, or hit the post and go wide. And it just kind of trickles in, and it seemed to happen in slow motion when it did.
Exactly. That's exactly how I was feeling.
Watching the replay, though, I mean, it's not as slow as I thought, but it was deflating. It was everything I could do. I mean, I told you before, I was putting on my cleats as getting ready to go to my game as it happened, and I just threw it at the wall. Like, I was just so pissed. But it's I don't know. That one hurt because it was like you mentioned, it was a big game. It was a game that we definitely needed the points from, and it was definitely one that we would have thought coming into it that everybody knows how important this is. This shouldn't be an issue, you know. Getting up for this game shouldn't be an issue, and I don't think we were up for it until they scored.
Yeah, I feel like that's been something that's been happening with our team all season long. I feel like our team, it just gets us it's just a long time until we're into the game. And you can't really blame Hasenhüttl for that because, I mean, he's already done so much. So it's got to come from the players. And there's only so much that, obviously, like I just said, the coaching staff can do. So you have to be able to play for the whole 90 minutes. You can't just get ready to play because of a goal. And that Cardiff goal was just, I mean, stupid. I mean, like, there were chances, I feel like, with, obviously, we talked about Valerie, obviously making some great offensive runs. I feel like you need to have more of that. You need to be more explosive when you're in the final third. You need to want to finish at the goal.
Yeah, you need to have people who are willing to be aggressive in that situation. And it looked a couple of times where the ball fell to Long, and he couldn't get a shot away, or it fell to Højbjerg, who was looking to maybe lay it off to somebody instead of being willing to shoot. And that's not necessarily what's made us good. I think so. If you look at a lot of the shots we've had, it's guys taking a touch and getting it out of their feet and having a shot. And I think that's worked a lot better for us. But then again, that's usually with us running forward or the ball bouncing, forward for us. And this today, we were kind of with I guess a lot of our forward players were getting the ball with their backs to goal and not having space to run into. And I think that is something that we really, really struggle with.
The one thing I do want to add, though, before we move on to the next thing is Stevens. So the clearance that he had when he was on the right side, I think it's so unacceptable. I'm going to go on a little bit of rant here. So Stevens, obviously a lot of people are upset with him, and I'm going to cut him some slack because Stevens, obviously we don't have a lot of depth on the Southampton team. So I appreciate obviously Stevens coming in because Yoshida obviously was with his international team. But in that case, you just can't get the ball away so easily. You just have to do everything you can to just clear that ball. I understand that you're going to make a mistake, maybe even just kick it out of bounds, but the one thing you can't have is just pass it to the other team. It was just, when I saw it happen, like, I was like, obviously they're bringing a little bit of press now, and I was like, it just can't happen. If they score, I'm obviously going to be very upset. They did, and obviously my first reaction was Stevens, which I know that's wrong of me to blame one person, but I feel like in that situation, Stevens can't give the ball away that easily.
No, he definitely can't. And it upsets me only because there were a lot of fans on his back last week. And I think that he, for a moment today, redeemed himself. He played very, very well, I thought, in that role in the center of a back three. He did well to score the goal. He was pretty impressive. And then it's just that one mistake that we're not good enough to overcome.
Right.
I think that's it. Is our team cannot afford to make a mistake because we can't. We just can't afford to do it. We don't have the quality to come back and make sure that we can climb out of games. Just like we don't have the ability to make sure that I don't know, man. It's frustrating because I want him to do well, you know?
Right. Yeah.
I guess that's what it is I want him to do well. He gets the goal today. He plays well in the center of the back three, even though people were upset that he was even in the squad, I think, because I think they wanted Yoshida back in. And then he goes and does that, and it just kind of undoes what, any progress that he would have made. And, maybe we needed to make a defensive signing in the window as well as a forward signing, but we didn't do anything. And so it leaves us in a kind of a weird spot now, because what are we going to do? I mean, you can't legislate for that kind of stuff. You can't plan for it. And unfortunately, we're just not good enough to overcome it, I guess. And it's just, I don't know. I am beyond frustrated with it right now. And I think I'm probably not alone in that.
Right. Yeah. The one thing I do also want to say is I feel like us fans, and this doesn't have to just go for Southampton, it can go for any sport in particular, but we always find a person or player to blame for something. If you want to look back, it was Hughes, for an example, and that's where a lot of people go to. They think of the coach because they're like, the team's not playing well, obviously the coach is in charge of that. Right now, obviously a lot of fans are happy with Hodgson, who, as they should be, I love him as a manager. So they have to find someone to find the blame. And right now, I feel like that's Jack Stephens, for an example. Obviously, people were very upset with him last week. And then this week, obviously, with that clearance, like I just said, he did get the goal. But are people going to be happy about his goal, or are they going to be mad about his clearance? And they're probably going to be mad about how he played in the last 30 seconds. So I feel like it is unfair to give a lot of grief to Jack Stephens. But I understand why people are doing it.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good point. Is we have to have a scapegoat. There has to be somebody has to have a mistake, or somebody has to be responsible for it. And in this case, I think it is Stephens for giving that ball away. But he's not responsible for the team not scoring before this. He's not responsible for not breaking down the team. He's not responsible because we didn't make a signing early in the transfer window or in the transfer window at all that would have improved the team and given us what we need, and right. And so, yeah, you can point at him, but he's there doing the absolute best that he can. And
it's very frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, I think you and I and everybody else probably gets away with making mistakes every single day. And right. It just happens that his happen on the pitch in the closing minutes of the game where everything's under a microscope and people want to blast him for it. And I'd put that today on the whole team, because we had what was it, 67% of the possession, and we couldn't do anything with it. And that's not on Stephens.
67%.
But I mean, the result leaves us essentially in the relegation. Not essentially, the result leaves us in the relegation zone, and it's going to be tough to get back. We just went through a run of games where we would have expected more points than we got. And so even going unbeaten, you go unbeaten against the teams around you, and then they get wins when they're not playing against you, and you fall further and further behind. And it's our goal difference isn't great, and it's just going to be a tough sled ahead. And some people were already saying, they thought we were going to go down. I'm not there. I don't think we're going down.
No, I don't think so at all.
But I mean, you have Arsenal coming up. You have Fulham midweek, then United, Tottenham, and you would think that we would be, having that's a tougher run of games, and it is. But you also look at how we've played against some of these bigger teams, and you would think, well, maybe this is the type of game that we need to play. Yeah,
they make a good point. The problem is, though, we play Arsenal in 15 days and 2 weeks. Like, this is just going to moan over me, this loss to Cardiff for 2 weeks. You know what I mean? And what I'm hoping, though, is maybe the Southampton players are going to just go all out against Arsenal because of how much frustration they had from this Cardiff game. So maybe obviously we've beaten Arsenal this year, so the players know that they can beat this team. It's just gonna come down to, can we do it at the end of the day?
Yeah, absolutely. But let's do this now. We have some questions, and so let's spend some time kind of looking at those. And we have a question from Patreon.com. The patrons of the show get priority for having their questions answered. And Kevin McGee has come in and says, if we don't win, we learn. That was one of the quotes that Ralph Hasenhüttl said in his opening press conference, or his first press conference. And I think it was his first press conference. I don't know. I've stolen it and put it in the show intro. So anyway, it's there. And what has Ralph learned from today is his question, and what reaction should we expect from the team? And I thought it was a really good question from Kevin. So thanks for sending that in as well. And if people are interested in doing that, they can head on over to patreon.com/SFC delivery and check out the tiers and everything that you can get if you decide to support the show that way. You were Ralph Hasenhüttl when you were looking at that game, as disappointed as we all are. What do you take away from there in terms of something you can build from, I guess?
Well, one thing we did talked about a lot was maybe you have to start Yoshida instead of Stevens. Maybe that's something you've learned and you have to make an adjustment there. One thing maybe Ralph has also learned is maybe the 5 in the back is just not going to work. I know he said earlier that if you have 5 in the back, we can't score. If you have 4 in the back, we concede. And I definitely understand that. But at the end of the day, we've been playing 5 in the back lately. And I know we haven't won per se, but we haven't lost. We've gone unbeaten. This just hurt, though. And seeing this awful performance, maybe you have to realize that you have to maybe go 4 in the back. At the same time, though, we haven't lost, though. So why not switch it up? Obviously, we did lose today, but except for today. So why change it up so much? But there's just a lot of questions to be asked. Maybe you try out some new players in the team. Obviously, we got a couple players coming back from loan, so maybe test those players out. But, there's obviously going to be a lot to learn from this next 3 months coming up in the rest of the season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
I think we have to learn how to play against teams who are not going to come after us. Cardiff this game was always going to be tough simply because we just don't have that creative player in our team that can break a team down, Yeah. And it was just mostly going to be about, can we unlock them? And then when it got to the point where it should have been more in our favor, where the game became slightly more open, where they were ahead, we scored, they came after us at that point, which is they needed that win, right? They needed these points even more so than we did. And when they came after us, that should have been to our advantage. And yet that's when we let it slip. And that's, I think, to me, what is frustrating. And so I think for me, you're going to have to figure out a something up front that allows you to better break down teams. And whether it's playing another striker, whether it's not, today's just not the game for Long to play, honestly. I don't care if Austin isn't in the long-term plan so much as today's the day you probably use him in the box, back to goal. That's where he's best. He's much better than Long is in that situation. And Long had so many kind of one-touch layoffs that were just awful. And I'm not usually one to criticize players like that, but there were so many times today where he had his back to goal and he went to hold the ball up, and he is strong and he does a relatively good job if it's around the halfway line. But around the edge of the area when he was making these layups, he was just giving the ball away. And, we just squandered possession and chance and everything else, and it just didn't work. All right. So we have some other questions from Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, which are all places you can submit your questions. Just look for the posts that ask for them or send them in anytime. It doesn't really matter. Caroline Emerson, who's at Soft Sally Saint, says Ralph has done well so far, but today has shown the vulnerabilities we still have. I feel that the main issue is still of belief in their own abilities, which has been an issue for some time now. How can Ralph help them overcome this major hurdle?
Very tough question to answer. Obviously, we've been lacking, I feel like, a lot of confidence. Obviously, we're not the best team in the Premier League, and we're not going to be for a long time. But the thing I have to say is I feel like there needs to be something that gets players almost fired up. So, for an example, when Hasenhüttl came in, obviously we were playing well. Obviously, being under a new manager can help. It doesn't, even if they still have the same ideas of being a manager, just having a new face in the locker room could help you a lot. And it could just be for anything, having something that gets you just motivated. And I feel like there needs to be something that gets this team fired up, because obviously against Cardiff today, we weren't ready to play, and that was a huge issue. So I feel like we need to have something that will spark an energy, because it looked like today the players just weren't ready to play. They weren't confident in themselves. So I feel like there needs to be something like that.
All right. I mean, he talked about having videos for people to watch in terms of what they've done well and what they've done poorly. And I hope those videos get longer after today, because there are some things to improve on. But I think we definitely want to see more driving forward, and when teams give you space and they have that open space, for it to not be so timid and to take it. And if you make a mistake, I mean, you just look at the difference that Redmond's had this year, especially under Hasenhüttl, where he takes all of the space that he's given when he gets the ball. He turns and he looks to run at people and make them, like, force them to make a challenge, you know? And we don't have enough people who are willing to do that. And as much as a lot of the players have come along, I mean, you look at James Ward-Prowse, you look at Redmond, they come to mind, especially. You look at what Valerie's been given the chance to do, and they've all benefited from Hasenhüttl coming in. And I do think, though, that there is still kind of the after effects of when passes aren't there and things like that. The guys get frustrated pretty quickly. And I'm not sure what the coach can do other than keep giving them chances to try to play their way out of it, to try to figure something out. And I don't think that's the answer. I think there has to be something there, and I hope Hasenhüttl has that answer, because I don't. But anyway, Kieran Oliver on Instagram says he's at K1ERAN0LIVER_. He says, do you think we will stay up this season, and do you reckon we will beat Arsenal next week?
So I do think we're going to stay up. Obviously, we had a chance to maybe even go 14th or 15th if we would have gotten all 3 points, but unfortunately we dropped points and now we're at the 18th spot. I feel like obviously a lot of people are going to say the Southampton team has not been well for the last year and this year. And I mean, you have reasons to say that, but just look at Fulham and Huddersfield. I think we can both agree, I don't know if you agree, hopefully you agree, that those two are most likely going to get relegated. And I feel like if you look at Southampton, Newcastle, Cardiff, and Burnley, even Brighton and Crystal Palace, all of us are within 3 points. And I feel like with Hasenhüttl now in charge, I feel like he's going to find a way even to just get us escaped from relegation. I feel like we have quality players that we're not going to be a championship level team. I feel like we still are a Premier League level team. And I am obviously a little bit worried that we're in relegation zone right now. But I feel like by the time the season ends, we don't have to worry about that. And then with the Arsenal game coming up next week, obviously it's going to be a tough one. We already beat them in the first half of the season, which was huge for us. So I'm hoping that we can do it again. The only problem is this one's at Emirates. Emirates is obviously going to be tougher to play than when we're home at St. Mary's. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I mean, if we can get a draw, I'd honestly be very happy. 3 points, I'd be ecstatic. But it's going to be a very tough one, to say the least.
And we have one more question here from Instagram from Cameron Andrade, who I believe is one of the co-hosts of the show that you run.
He is.
So he says, what do you guys think? If you haven't heard the little girls until now, they're definitely here. He says, what do you guys think you have to do to make that top 7 to 10 spot permanent for the times to come? So I don't know who he supports, but whoever it is, I wish them
He
nothing.
is actually an Arsenal fan.
Well, I wish them nothing but ill will. And some of my best friends are Arsenal fans, but we don't have to talk about that. So, I mean, I guess this is looking kind of long term, but from your perspective, what needs to change at the club in terms of making us I guess just a permanent top half team?
So I feel like you've probably heard this before. I've heard it before. And this is going to be a very cliche thing to say, but I feel like it has to come from the transfer window. I love how we're developing young players because, like you said, for the future, those young players can be exposed to Premier League minutes. time goes on, they get obviously a lot better. But the thing is, obviously right now, our defense and our goal scoring is not where it wants to be. If we want to be a top 7 to 10 team like we were with Claude Puel, obviously we got the 8th spot. It comes to the transfer window, in my opinion. We have to be signing someone who will help us out a lot because, you look at other teams and they're just doing a lot in the transfer window. What did we do in the January transfer window? Absolutely nothing. We got rid of players. We didn't bring in anyone. And what makes me so upset is when we, for example, sell Van Dijk. Obviously, 75 million for him was a lot of money. So what did we do with that 75 million? That's the real question. Why can't we buy a center back to replace them, even if it's for 30 million? Why can't we get a striker up top who's going to get us more goals? Obviously, we got Danny Ings, who has shown that he can score, but the problem is injuries. But I'm still a fan of Danny Ings. Why can't we spend more of that money that we're getting, because we do produce very good players? So I think that if we want to be a 7 to 10 spot, it has to come from the transfer window. We have to invest in very young players who can make a promise in the Southampton FC team.
Yeah, I think we definitely have to change maybe the philosophy of the team, and the owners for the last several years have always allowed any of the money that the team has made to be spent, but the investment in the squad is not there. And I mean, we're talking just way more money than I think most of us will ever deal with, but a lot of that money though comes from the collective. A lot of it comes from the TV broadcast deal, but it also comes from a lot of the people that are going to matches day in and day out. And so, I mean, yes, most of the fans that are watching and that are attending the matches are not, and watching around the world, we're not anywhere near the level of being able to say, like, put some money into the squad. But the people who own Premier League clubs generally do have that at their disposal, and the fact that they're not kind of choosing not to do that is beyond frustrating for a lot of the people who spend their hard-earned money each day or each week to go see the team. And so I saw a comment on Twitter, I forget who said it, but do we just have essentially like an East Asian Mike Ashley, just somebody who's not going to invest in the squad? And that's a pretty damning statement, I think, but one that is valid because there hasn't been the investment that I think we need. So I think just a philosophical change will have to come if we're going to make that 7 or 10 to 7 spot kind of permanent, I think. And I'm not sure that the only thing that I'm worried about in answering that question is that we somehow feel like we are, I guess, entitled to that, or that's where we should be. And I always want to think of my team as somebody who should be up there. But I think there are a lot of fans who have been listening and watching the team for a very long time, who have gone through, relegation battle after relegation battle after relegation battle, and then had a season where, they got to the FA Cup final, or they got to, they went down, they were relegated, and then they won, and then they come back and they won the JPT trophy and all this stuff. And I think they've been through it more so than I have. And so I don't want to assume that we get to be 7 to 10 because that's where I think we should be, but that's, I think it's definitely where we want to be, and it's where we all aspire to be. But I'm not sure it's going to happen for a couple of seasons, as much as Ralph has done great. I mean, I think when I was looking at kind of the points that he was putting together, a 1.5 per game on average would have seen us finish much higher up the table than we would have last year. And so, but even that, I mean, we basically tread water since he took over from Hughes, because the teams around us are doing the same thing. So it's I don't know, it doesn't leave us in a great spot. But you have been fantastic, Kurt. I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking with me about this, and hopefully it's gone okay for you. I know it's getting a little later over there on the East Coast. I still have some sunshine. I'm not sure about you, but well, once again, why don't you just tell everybody where they can find you and your show, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, so I do, like I said, have my own podcast. It's called the BSO Podcast. The main platforms you can find it on is Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. You can also find it on Anchor or Spotify. Those are the 4 main ones that you can find it. If you want to follow our Instagram or Twitter account, is at the BSO Show. THEBSO, then SHOW. So it's pretty much my podcast. We go through all sports. It's not just soccer, even though we do go over soccer, basketball, football, just etc. And so if you want to check us out, make sure that follow us on Instagram and check out our podcast.
Yeah, did you guys record an episode today or tomorrow, or when do you guys do
Yes, so we recorded one today, but it will be published tomorrow. So if you're interested, make sure, which is Sunday, February 10th. So make sure you guys do check that out.
So when they hear this, it'll be published on Sunday. So
yes.
Yeah, the space-time continuum thing. All good. But anyway, Kurt, you've been fantastic. So thank you so much for joining the show, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, so thank you again very much for having me on. Always a blast to hear your podcast and what you got to say.
I appreciate that. And that does it for this episode of the Southampton Delivery Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Special thanks this week goes out to Kurt Zottl. You can find him on Twitter at Kurt Zottl, and his podcast, The BSO Show, on Twitter and Instagram at The BSO Show. You can get a hold of this show at SFCDELL_IVERY on Twitter and Instagram. And we're on Facebook at facebook.com/SFC Delivery. There is no underscore in the Facebook address. And of course, the new way to get a hold of the show is right on the website at southamptondelivery.com. Once again, be sure to sign up for the email newsletter that will put some articles and everything else directly in your inbox once a week, and hopefully you enjoy that. If you haven't already subscribed to the show, be sure to do that on iTunes, Stitcher, Acast, Google Play, TuneIn Radio, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can even listen to the show directly on the website. Can you tell I'm excited? I'm excited. Anyway, if you'd like to support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/SFC Delivery. You'll get access to a private members-only chat with me and other Patreon supporters, as well as access to exclusive content only available to members. In addition to Patreon supporters, this show is made possible by Matt Beeling of the We Are Southampton page on Instagram. He does the artwork and the logo for the show, as well as the Southampton page for all your Southampton FC news and needs. Jay and the rest of the team do a great job of bringing you the news each and every day. All music for the show comes courtesy of the Free Music Archive at freemusicarchive.org. The intro song is Epic Song by Boxcat Games, and the end of show credits that you're listening to right now is Aim is True by Poddington Bear. Saints are off to Tenerife, but we will be back next week. Looking forward to it, as I hope you are too. And until then, remember that together, we march on. Girls, are you ready? To go to Nona's and see the dog. Yeah. All right, let's go.